Well, 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 look who has a new camera set up. Dear Lord, that was far too much fun. Here's hoping that I can find the willpower not to do that at the beginning of every single video because it might get a little silly at that point. But yes, as we can see, I now have a new camera set up. Sitting down, which is rather strange from my end as far as videos go. I've never done that before, with a nice desk in front of me, bookshelf and everything. Still very much a work in progress, trying to figure out exactly what sort of camera angles I want to get. You know, I can have the camera in front of me here, maybe off to the side, you know, then more of a angled perspective. I don't know. We're still working some things around that. And as far as lighting goes, I do know that that needs to improve. Not to worry, I actually have coming in the mail in the next couple of days here, I believe, some much more professional level lighting. So while I'm planning on doing a couple of videos today, so there will be a little bit of a gap until we see the effects of that, going forward there will in future be much better lighting levels than what we have right now. And in fact, I imagine that the lighting levels in future will be much better than they've pretty much ever been before. So look forward to that. Otherwise, yeah, so there are a few other things I need to do as far as decorating is concerned. I definitely want to add, you know, some sort of a picture or a poster up there in the back. It's something to add a little bit more color to the area. The idea was recommended maybe like a plant on the desk here, and maybe if I can try and fix the angle a little bit to where we can see more of the desk, because I have a lot more things on this desk than is currently being shown than you can really see in this little bit that is exposed. The idea was put forward that I can put a flagpole in the back corner there. You're not able to see that back corner at the moment, but again, once we have decorations there, maybe if I play around with the angles, we can get more of a setup. But in any case, do let me know what you think in the comments down below as far as, you know, what the new setup could use, how we can improve it, that sort of thing. Now, there may be some of you out there, however, who say something along the lines of, now hold on, Brandon, this entire setup seems very familiar, sitting at a desk with a bookshelf behind you with antique books that you've, you know, never actually read, but they certainly make you feel very important. This looks very familiar. Isn't this Griffy Johnsen's old setup, the Armchair Historian, before he updated his own? To which I would respond, my dear viewer, yes, it pretty much is. I'm very much taking inspiration from how he did things with my own new setup. But this is my transition. Are you ready for this? This is my transition. But you see, I am not the only one shamelessly ripping off and attempting to siphon off some of the success from the Armchair Historian. You see, there's also another YouTube channel by the name of, and do apologize, I have to put on my cheaters here in order to actually see my computer screen. Ah, that's what it looks like. The channel name of Ashtyn Jon 2.0. Yes, indeed, my friends, this is the new and improved Ashtyn Jon, if you believe it or not. You see, they are a reaction channel, which is to say, not that they're a commentary channel like, you know, H3H3 or Danny Gonzalez or Drew Gooden or any of these people with talent. They are a reaction channel, which is to say they will sit at their desk, much like this. They will turn their attention to their computer, which is at a very strange angle because while the camera's here, the computer's like right there, so they're spending the entire video just sort of like this. And they will watch a video and they will react to it in real time, which is to say no script writing, no comedy, but rather they watch the video and occasionally you will see a facial expression change, and occasionally they will pause the video and they will offer some sort of comment on it. Dear Lord, I'm being a lot more grilling than I thought I would be so far, but you see, the reason why I'm being a little, I admit, cruel in this is that the video they reacted to was the Armchair Historian's Why Did Soldiers Fight in Lines? Why they reacted to this video, I don't know. Why one of their viewers seems to have recommended it, I don't know. Doesn't seem very appropriate for their style. In fairness, they may well be more entertaining than I'm giving them credit for, just not with this sort of video. This is the only one that I've seen. So it's maybe some of their other stuff is a lot better. I'm just not experienced with it. Indeed, it certainly does seem to be the case because I'm looking at my screen here. It looks like their top donation from this stream, I suppose they just uploaded the video from a stream that they were doing, was from a Mr. Jason who gave $750 to them. So I suppose that, well, joke's on me in the end. But yes, indeed, they reacted to Mr. Griffin Johnson's video on why soldiers fight in lines, and in that video, they state a number of things which are a little off, to say the least. I thought that I would provide my own commentary on their commentary, hopefully with a bit more content involved as opposed to just blatantly ripping off someone else's video, because in the end that is ultimately what this represents, isn't it? Is they're reacting to the video, but they have the real video in the lower left-hand corner. They are dead silent for the majority of it, so they're just, you're effectively just watching someone else's video. Occasionally they will hit pause, offer a few words, and then hit play again, which, if it does fall under the Creative Commons license or under fair use, yeah, that's the word for it, fair use, it falls very, very thinly upon it, I think. Ergo, I will be doing some jump cuts in this video in order to make up for that time when they're not saying anything, so I won't be saying anything because, unlike them, I am not wanting to rip off entirely Griffin Johnson's content and profit off of his success. These people, however, I'm willing to use their name to garner some success because they are much more popular than I am. And so let us begin. I do hope that you will forgive another little anachronism here, as I do have to be able to actually hear the video as I watch it and provide my gripping, my fascinating, my entertaining, my humorous commentary on someone else's content. And play.
Hey guys, it's Ashtyn.
And it's John. What's up, guys? We're back with another reaction video. In today's video, we're going to be reacting to...
Why did soldiers fight in lines? Animated history.
This was a suggestion from...
Ryan.
Thank you so much. You guys...
Ryan, why? Why, of all the videos that you could recommend, Ryan, why this one in particular? Surely there are other videos more appropriate to these individuals' style of content than a documentary. I mean, a cringe video, a prank video, a meme of some, I don't know. Surely there is content more appropriate than educational content. But in the end, I won't complain because, of course, it's giving me content too. So I suppose in that way, thank you, Ryan, for your strange, though certainly intriguing recommendation.
You can also suggest a video. Click link down below in the description. Donate $8 in the video link or title. We'll react to it in 36 hours. Streamlabs.com/AshtynJoslin. Keep under 10 minutes. Include your email, and these amounts do change, so keep that in mind. But when you click on it, it'll tell you what it's currently at. It's based off how backed up we are, though.
Did I hear that right? That they charge donations for people to react for people to give them recommendations for videos to react to? I mean, that seems rather scummy in a way. Well, I won't question their business practices, I suppose. Moving on.
Let's go
Follow
ahead.
me on Instagram too, you guys. I'm going to be posting some good content on there. I already have some up, so if you want to see my mom.
It's a good thing that she specified... Oh, I think the cats are the most entertaining things so far. It's a good thing that she specified that she's posting good content, because otherwise, I mean, how are you supposed to know? I mean, I post so much terrible content, I wouldn't really... Maybe I should actually start posting good content instead.
When a modern audience sees 18th century warfare in film or television, such as in The Patriot, the question that first comes to mind is, why are they just standing in lines and firing back and forth?
Yes, because it doesn't make sense when there could be guerrilla warfare going on.
All right, so there we have the first claim, if we will. Although, in all fairness, I will not deride Mr. John for his comments here all too much, because ultimately... it's what you'd expect. You know, it's a common misconception, as Griffin said in his own video, and presumably if someone is watching this video, it's because the original video that is, it's because they want to find out, well, why did soldiers fight in lines? It seems silly. Because yes, to a modern audience, at first glance, it does seem rather silly until you learn the very complicated reasons behind why soldiers would fight in lines, which incidentally, John's comment here that it doesn't make any sense because they ought to be fighting in guerrilla warfare. Well, that is wrong, but for reasons that will be discussed in this video, and for reasons which, you know, we will be talking about a great deal in this video as well, so I won't provide too much, comment or censure on that mark there. Instead, let us carry on. But I assure you, Mr. Jon and Ashtyn version 2.0, that indeed it does make an awful lot of sense, and as we shall see, they have a few other recommendations which do not make so much sense. Play.
And while they really should be asking themselves, why am I even watching The Patriot?
Very good. But you see, this is what I mean, is Griffin, he puts forward a joke, good content, comedy, creativity.
Still a valid one.
They were just sitting there watching it with a blank face, and he chuckles. She doesn't even chuckle, I don't. Well,
I like that dumb wallpaper behind him. It's just like literally a wallpaper. I thought it was real books at first.
Really?
And then you pay attention, and it's just a wall.
In lines, it also must be understood how line formation Gustavus Adolphus II, king of Sweden during this period, which allowed them to move around the battlefield as one unit, implemented formations designed to maximize firepower.
When it came to maximizing the number of troops who could see and shoot a given target.
Makes sense.
As a result,
so far, we are a rather significant way through Griffin's original video, and the only comments that have been added to the original material by Mr. Jon — Ashtyn hasn't said a word, she's just been staring off into space — by Jon are true that, and makes sense. This isn't adding anything to the original material. This is becoming less of a history video, this is just becoming more of my rambling and ranting video, but you're not adding anything to the original material. This is not content creation, just blatantly put. Why do people give these individuals money?
Gustavus's system worked, it was not flawless. In the words of Professor
Divided by the formations based on the square. A line that could only face
introduction of the bayonet, a short blade that could be attached to the end of a firearm, which allowed infantrymen to fend off cavalry charges without pikes. Bayonets were probably invented early in the 1600s, but did not become widespread until the 1670s. Although at first they had to be inserted into the barrel of a firearm, this was solved by the invention of the socket bayonet, which allowed a musket to be fired
actually in the barrel, like it showed right there.
Yeah, I know that part's dumb, but other than that, it's a cool concept,
Right.
All right, so here we have the advent of the plug bayonet and then the later socket bayonet. The difference being that the plug one had to indeed be put inside the actual muzzle of the piece, and so you were unable to fire your musket while it was attached, as opposed to the later socket bayonet, which could be fit around the outside of the barrel, and off to the side, it allows you to actually use the musket with the bayonet fixed. To which our hard-hitting team of historians here has provided the commentary that it was, the plug bayonet that is, so dumb, and while the concept was good, it was, again, quite dumb. Now, in all fairness, maybe the original video, Griffy Johnsen's video, should have had a bit more context as to why bayonets started out as plug bayonets and then became socket bayonets. So I won't blame them for not knowing the exact reason. But again, we have right here one of, I think, the most common problems when it comes to historical analysis at the hands of laymen. That being, if you do not understand why something was done, it is simply ascribed to stupidity. Why did they put the bayonets, the knives, as Jon refers to it, inside the guns when they could just put them outside of the guns? That was really stupid. Don't they know if they didn't put the thing inside the gun, they'd be able to shoot it at the same time as use the bayonet? Wow, they were stupid. That was dumb. Well, no, not quite. There is always, or at least nigh on always, a reason behind things like this. Why, this development took some time to come about. This is a socket bayonet. So as you can see, it has a ring along the outside, so able to go over top of the barrel of the musket, but the actual blade is held out to the side, so you can in fact use the piece while it is fixed to the gun. Indeed, it is in every way an improvement over the old plug bayonet. So why didn't they just skip right to using these? Why didn't they just have the idea to use these right away? Well, the answer lies, I think, at least in part, with this bit right here, the piece that actually allows it to function. This has to be, in order for this design to work, this has to be an extraordinarily strong piece of metal, because there is an awful lot of pressure being applied here whenever the bayonet is being used. You know, the main weight is being carried back here off to the side. It is being thrust forward. This is where there's a lot of force being applied along this line right here. This is where the actual pressure is being applied, carried along through this, you know, very thin piece of metal for the actual blade to do what it does best. That's a rather poor way of describing it, I know, but I think you got the idea. When you are using the bayonet, you know, stabbing it into someone, all of the pressure, all of the force, so to say, is really being concentrated right here. If this breaks, if it bends, if it snaps, if this is not strong enough, the entire thing becomes useless. You have to be able to make a solid piece of steel, as the entire thing is made of steel, and it's a very large piece, which adds complexity to the actual design, as opposed to you know, the original bayonets, the socket bayonets, which are, you know, he referred to them as knives, and I derided him for that. But in the end, actually, effectively, it is just a particular kind of knife. It has a wooden handle, which really all knives had to that point. Well, not all, obviously, but, you know, that's how the majority of things would have had that. That's the natural way to make the things. And it has a straight blade, which goes directly into the gun itself. You know, the blade comes out here. So all of the force is along a straight path, along a straight line. It's much sturdier. It's much stronger. It's much more difficult to break. And you can make a plug bayonet a lot more easily than you can a socket bayonet. This turn, while it doesn't seem like all that much, adds a certain layer of complexity to the design, which means that, you know, you have to have a certain amount of infrastructure to be able to actually make them. It's a matter of economy, although, again, it is such a massive improvement that it did prove ultimately, you know, to be the thing that they ended up using. Yes, and these sorts of things as well, this sort of design. The idea of having a small notch or nodule on top of your musket that can slide into the, you know, into the socket here and then be twisted in, you know, that sliding piece there, to allow the bayonet to actually lock into place. Again, these are levels of complexity, which it's easy to see not only how economically, it is harder to design and harder to manufacture en masse, as for a military, you need large numbers of these things to make them work, but also how it would take time for people to realize that you can do things like this. It is very easy from a modern perspective to look and say, oh, well, it looks so obvious to do this sort of thing. But again, well, hindsight is always 20/20 in matters of military history, and oh, we shall see in this video coming up a few other instances, I think, of hindsight being 20/20. Either that, or alternatively, these two individuals are some of the greatest military minds the world has ever seen, because they are able to realize things, oh, so much faster than the top general minds of the 18th century ever did. With that, let us carry on.
But other than that, it's a cool concept, you know.
Right. Then they fixed it when they invented this one.
Right.
Which allowed a musket to be fired with the bayonet itself from almost anything. Although soldiers were better equipped than they had for a number of reasons. First, and most importantly, the only formation. When infantry was not in formation, they were especially vulnerable, as this meant that each man's flanks...
They don't even say his name, they just point and make a clicking noise. See, that seems rude. That seems quite rude. That person just gave you $20! $20! That's a good amount of money right there. That's a solid chunk of change. And you just go, that doesn't... At least read their name. Give a thank you. Something.
It was easier to maneuver large numbers of men in a rigid formation.
But they didn't use armor, though.
No, they didn't use armor.
Which is dumb. Like, if you're going to go out there, you should have some kind of chest-plated armor or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
but
if you're getting shot at and you're trying to win the war...
I get what you're saying, but I just don't know if that would reflect a musket ball. I don't know how strong, like, some plate would be against a gun. Muskets weren't that strong compared to weapons today. The bullets weren't made right. They were just pure circles, so clearly it doesn't have as much piercing damage, but I think it would still go through most plates. You have to have a pretty thick, you know, like
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Probably
anything
a quarter inch
that
on
would
your
protect
chest.
them.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't. I'm sure some did.
I just think it's stupid, because it's like, if you're trying to win the war, you're obviously... you're gonna want to protect yourself, so why not have some kind of armor on you? Like, you don't want to weigh yourself down either, but
Exactly.
a little bit of armor is not gonna be too bad.
I agree.
And if you're doing this, you should already be like super active already. Like, you should be very like quick at running and stuff already, like trained for it. And so that plate shouldn't really affect them that much.
Well, the front line should definitely have some kind of like heavier plate where if they get shot even once, they might not get dropped. That way they're protecting the back line. You know, like these dudes up here in the front, these four
I think everybody should.
would have a heavy plate, and these dudes are just light and quick firing.
Don't they use that nowadays if they need? Like, don't they have some kind of
Armor?
Yeah.
Yeah, they got bulletproof vests on.
See?
They got Kevlar on and stuff like that. Yeah, almost all of them do, but they didn't have that invented back then, so I don't know how strong a musket is, but if the front guys did have some kind of a plate that was still not super heavy, but they could wear it, that would have been smart, but maybe it was expensive too, for have every guy have that. They couldn't afford it, you know, because money wasn't like the United States now where we just throw money at anything that says military on it.
I know.
Let's keep going, guys. Oh, but the thing is, it's like, why didn't they fight in the trees?
Okay, all right, so he's starting to get into another idea there about why, asking why they didn't fight in trees. Okay, so there's an awful lot to unpack here. Why did soldiers not wear armor? The idea put forward that they were dumb. It was stupid. It was dumb for them to not wear armor back in the day. After all, they want to win the war, don't they? Well, again, there's many reasons as to why that is. And Jon actually at least began to hint at the ultimate reason why towards the end of that little clip there, largely being a matter of economy. Armor is extraordinarily expensive to produce, and this could probably be a whole other video that I could do, so I won't go into too much detail about it here. I've already been going on for far too long, I see by the little counter on my camera there. It's very expensive to produce is the thing. And it must be remembered that for even like medieval economies, you know, a time period when armor was much more required in warfare because it was all, you know, melee oriented, most soldiers would not be wearing full suits of armor. You know, most of them would have very little compared with, say, the upper echelons of society, the cavalry, the men-at-arms, the knights, those sorts of things, the lords and such. Armor is very expensive to make for a pre-industrial economy. And of course, 18th century, these are, for the most part, pre-industrial, it depends on how you define industrial, but pre-industrial cottage-based economy. For every individual soldier that you could equip with a suit of armor, the enemy, long story short, is going to be able to field a lot more soldiers than you. It's very, very difficult to equip an army with that sort of thing, and very expensive. Now, the other idea that's put forward by Ashtyn is that soldiers ought to have been able to use armor because they should have been physically strong enough to actually use it. To which, you know, they're running around a lot, as she says. They ought to have the physical strength required. To which I would respond, well, first off, it's not only a matter of wearing the armor in a battle, which I'm sure, yes, that they would have had the ability to do that, but it's also a matter of upkeeping the armor, of carrying it around on campaign. It must be remembered that in the days when armor was more commonly being worn, especially, say, in the Middle Ages, when with these full suits and everything, a knight would have a full train of servants dedicated to the maintenance, the upkeep of that armor, because it is very difficult to keep up with. They would have to have assistants to actually don the armor because, at least with particular aspects of it, particular parts of it, it's almost impossible to put everything on by yourself. As it is, it's difficult enough to put this stuff on by yourself, let alone, you know, armor with the straps all along the sides and difficult to bend your arms particular ways, all that sort of thing. But even for very simple sets of armor, say a simple breastplate that a soldier can wear, while, yes, it would help them a great deal in battle if their governments could even afford to give them these pieces, while it would be helpful in a battle, the majority of a soldier's life is not spent in battle. Majority of a soldier's life, at least in this time period, during a period of war, is going to be on campaign, marching 10, 15, 20 miles every single day, lugging with you already your mess equipment, your rations, your musket, about 9 or 10 pounds right there. Your bayonet, your pack, if you are lucky enough to have a pack or a knapsack or a blanket roll of some sort, so you can, sleep underneath something in the night. These armies are going to have to be lugging with them artillery, cannon, that's a whole other train that you have to have with you. Wagons, carts filled with other provisions and supplies and whatnot. Tents, if you're very lucky. Things like, well, again, mess equipment, so cauldrons, pans, things like that, which would oftentimes be split among the men who's going to take their turn carrying these very heavy pieces. Oh, and heaven forbid, if you happen to be a specialist in the army of some sort, if you are a pioneer, by way of example, you'll also be carrying around an axe with you. If you're a sergeant, you get to carry a sword with you on top of the bayonet and the musket, a sword which, incidentally, you'll probably never even use. It's just a symbol of authority. If by some chance you happen to be a cobbler in the army, you get to carry around on your back all of the cobbling equipment. If you are an armor of some sort, the person who's taking care of all the musketry, well, you get to carry around all the tools of your trade then. There is an awful lot already being lugged around by these men for, again, upwards of 20 miles potentially every single day. For us to add on another piece of equipment, a very heavy piece of solid steel or iron to be worn across the chest, to say nothing of how ridiculously uncomfortable that would be, to say nothing of how warm it would be. Heat exhaustion remains, during this time period, one of the most significant problems for soldiers in the field. Why? Well, largely because they're wearing wool uniforms, which, again, we may say, well, that sounds stupid. Why would you wear wool uniforms? There are many reasons as to why they would wear wool. Sorry, I keep on clicking with the button there. We will talk about that in a future video as well. But indeed, a big piece of metal like that is going to just soak up the heat. You know it will very well. And what's more, of course, even worse than all of those things is, yes, while these men were very physically hardy, they were very strong, certainly much more impressive than I am sitting before you now, it must be remembered just how hard it was to campaign back in the day. While we reenactors, we sit underneath a nice cool marquee, we drink plenty of water, we have a nice lunch before going out to the battle, we relax all day, that sort of thing. These men who were forced to march 20 miles a day before getting almost no sleep by sleeping outside under the stars or under the heavy rain clouds, who were racked daily with problems of sickness and disease because medical technology was not so strong as it is today. Indeed, disease has always been the primary killer of soldiers up until at least very modern, very recent history. All of these problems, they are running as well on very little food, very little water supplies. This idea that you need to maintain hydration wasn't fully understood to the extent that it was today, and men would go on very little water, and they would eat sometimes not at all for a number of days. Military rations, when they did get them in good conditions, were very, very slim, very limited. You have, at best, a little bit of meat, which is primarily, I imagine, fat and bones, at least if you're not very lucky and you're a mess with how they split up the meat by weight per person. And as well, perhaps you get some ship's biscuit or hardtack, which is to say a biscuit which is so very hard you have to really slam it against the table to break it up into little chunks so you can actually eat it. Maybe soak it in some water or coffee. Oh, if you're very lucky, soak it in some coffee. What these men were expected to do and the conditions in which they were expected to do them is extraordinarily, it's incredible. It's stunning, the accomplishments that these men achieved, and particularly those armies which were less well supplied, such as, say, in the American War of Independence, the Continental Army, who oftentimes these soldiers would go days without eating and still be expected to perform all of the duties of a regular soldier. Indeed, reading through accounts like the memoirs of Joseph Plum Martin, the majority of the account, it's not his heroic tales of battle, of him charging gallantly across fields and engaging the enemy with, flags waving and everything. The majority of his account is him looking for food and talking about how hungry and cold and miserable he is. So, sorry, I got off on a bit of an aside there. To say the least, Yes, these men were certainly strong enough to carry armor, but would they be carrying it all the time on top of all of these other concerns that they had? No, certainly not. Indeed, actually, in the recollections of Rifleman Harris, there is an excellent account. He's a rifleman from the Napoleonic Wars. There's an excellent account of how Harris, because he's carrying around his cobbling gear as well as all of his military equipment, at one point it came his turn to carry sort of a cauldron that belonged to his mess, the men that he would regularly prepare his meals with. Except, here's the thing, marching through Spain, very difficult conditions, very warm and everything, he's carrying this cauldron, and he gets the feeling that he's kind of getting the short end of the stick, that he's been carrying the cauldron for too long, it's someone else's turn to carry the cauldron. So he requests that someone else carries the load for him, and they tell him, well, no, it's not our turn yet, you haven't carried it long enough. Bit of a spat. He says, you know what? Screw you guys then, to heck with it. He drops the cauldron off by the side of the road, and they keep on marching without their cauldron that they would use to prepare food with. Very rather important piece, and they leave it off by the wayside. Armies during this time period were renowned. You can always find where an army is because they would just slog off material, bits of equipment and kit like so many dry skin cells as they're marching along on campaign, particularly if they're rushing somewhere. Something is too heavy, it will be left by the wayside. That has been shown repeatedly throughout history. I'm utterly convinced that if an 18th century army did decide, hey, we're going to give all you guys breastplates, yeah, that wouldn't last very long. All right, that was carried on for very long. Let's move on, shall we?
Let's keep going, guys. Oh, but the thing is, it's like, why didn't they fight in the trees? Why didn't they just wait for the attacking army to reach some kind of a tree line where they couldn't use their cavalry at all and they're just hiding in the trees? Where they got cover fire and the other team doesn't. That's what I mean. That the guerrilla warfare tactic versus, hey, we're going to meet you in this field even though you got 10 times more people than us. I'd be like, hell no, I'm going to go hide in my house and shoot you through the window because that way I got a higher chance of hitting you and you have a lower chance of hitting me.
All right, so carrying on, John issues another rather poorly informed comment as to the nature of warfare in general, let alone during this time period. He asks the question, why did they meet each other in fields? I would just go into the trees so they can't use their, as he refers to it, cavalry. It's cavalry, Sarah. Cavalry is something very different. Cavalry. Or hide in houses and fight behind trees and walls and those sorts of things. And again, this is something that I will go into a bit more detail a bit later on, so I won't talk about it too much here today. But suffice to say that if you are heavily outnumbered, if you are in a position where you are able to defend, if you are able to build fortifications and throw up defensive works, if you can fight guerrilla style in trees and whatnot, or behind a fence, behind walls, yes, you do that. They would do that quite commonly. It was extraordinarily common for, if an army is defending a particular point, then yes, they throw up defensive works and they will make use of that. They wouldn't be like, oh, well, that would be dishonorable. We have to meet them in the field. No, that's largely a modern anachronism as far as an understanding of how they fought back in the day. They would make use of these things very commonly. But the nature of a military campaign is that you cannot always do that. Why wouldn't they just sit at home, hide in their houses, and then snipe at the enemy as they're approaching in the open? Well, sure, that would work fine if the enemy is trying to capture your city, but what if you have to take their city? What if you have to attack them in order to gain your objective, whatever that may be, whatever varied number of objective types there are in conflict? Sometimes armies will meet each other in the field accidentally. Different elements of a force, foraging parties and whatnot, will run against one another. They will begin fighting, skirmishing, and so other units move in to reinforce, to assist them, and all of a sudden, oh, look at that, you have a general action because the armies sort of meet together at this central point where other forces were already fighting. Now, yes, you can sit inside your city, hold out and defend, let the enemy army run around, burn down your farms and your villages, starve out everyone, and, basically force you to surrender, because if you're not going to go out and fight them, you're just going to continue eating up those food supplies, being under siege is a very bad thing to be under as far as maintaining military discipline as well. You have to try and keep control of all those men who are maybe not being fed very well. Alternatively, if you don't want to suffer the ravages of a campaign, of an enemy waging campaigns in your countryside, you can leave your city, you can go out and you can meet that other army, that enemy army, and you can attempt to stop them from doing those things. You fight in a field for that reason, in an attempt to drive that enemy army away back into their lands so you can wage a campaign in their countryside, which is much better for you overall, so to say. Simply put, you are not always militarily in a position that you can defend. Certainly, when you can, you are at the advantage. It's always said that the attacker wants to outnumber the defender 3-1 to overcome those inherent advantages of defending and having fortifications and whatnot. But it is simply not always the case. You cannot plan on being able to enforce your country's will, on being able to actually enforce your nation's interests abroad if you only ever defend. It just doesn't work.
As muskets were very inaccurate, the only way for soldiers to inflict damage on their opponent was by concentrating all of their fire on one target.
So
Combat
inaccurate.
in this era...
True that, he says, they were so inaccurate. You ever even fired a musket, sir? Well, I tell you, I have fired a musket many, many times, and I have never hit a thing. I know that they are very inaccurate. Do you know that they're very inaccurate? Something tells me not. Griff could have said anything there, and he would have said, oh, yeah, that's whatever. All right, moving on.
The enemy and forcing him to retreat from the battlefield, and this was often accomplished by bayonet and cavalry charge.
More reach than the slings, bows, and ballistae that they superseded. While for
True
close
that.
fighting, manual weapons,
At the Battle of Waterloo,
right there,
where
that's
companies of
perfect,
British
yeah.
infantry broke multiple French cavalry charges, it became clear that linear formations would eventually become obsolete, highly accurate and deadly munitions, such as the
those
mini
bolts,
ball.
yes.
These new weapons could also against cavalry, kept much-needed order and discipline within of all of these points. Linear tactics eventually succumbed to the inevitable obsolescence.
2 advertisements then. But there it is, guys. I don't get how the musket came into play, though. They say it's more like what's the word for it? Where it was greatly improved upon versus like a bow. It just threw that completely out of the water. But wouldn't a bow be so much more effective? Because if you actually know how to use it, you're more accurate than a musket. You can reload.
I don't know. I think they were all stupid. I think they should have had
God. Oh, Jesus Christus. Okay. First off, to John's question, or to John's point, why did they begin using muskets? Why did they not use bows? Because they were faster to reload, as it were, and they could have the same amount of accuracy, if not more. Again, a complicated question, which I can talk more about in future videos if we are so interested, but the simple way to frame it is, again, a matter of complexity. In order to train a man to be able to use a bow and arrow, say a longbow, an English longbow, it requires, it's very difficult to train a man. It is a lifelong pursuit to be able to effectively use a bow and arrow. Indeed, back in the days, like 15th century and whatnot, when they were being used a lot more commonly, of course, it was law in England that every man above a certain age was required on Sundays, I think it was after church, to practice with a longbow. And what's more, actually, is they require a very specific kind of wood, like yew trees and whatnot, which are also very difficult to acquire, very rare kind of resource, so to say. Indeed, it was also a law, as I understand it, in England for a while, that every single church had to plant yew trees so that the country did not diminish its supply, so they were able to continue manufacturing the bows. It's very, very difficult to raise an army of these things, and if by some chance something happens and you lose an army, say there's a disastrous campaign and you lose an army, you need to raise another one very quickly because otherwise the enemy is going to be on your doorstep. With musketry, with musketmen, so long as you have the pieces, you can give those to the people and you can drill them pretty quickly. Comparatively speaking, you can drill an army up to at least some semblance of discipline and ability with a musket very, very easily, efficiently, and quickly, as opposed to longbows. If you lose a longbowman, an individual longbowman, that is a massive loss because it will take years to train him back up to that level of professionalism, so to say. With a musket, you can acquire at least somewhat comparable levels rather quickly. Now, one-on-one, longbow versus a musket, will the longbow probably win? Actually, yeah, there's a very good chance that they would. But ultimately, again, just like the armor, just like so many other things, you run into a question of, for every one longbowman you have, there's going to be 5, 10, however many more musketmen running up against you. And guess who wins that battle? Now, before I hit pause, Ashtyn was getting ready to grace us with an extraordinary piece of military wisdom. She said something about how she thinks everyone back in the day was just stupid. So, let's get right on into it.
I don't know. I think they were all stupid. I think they should have had what are they called? The ones that just keep going, you know, like the ones.
Machine gun?
Yeah, I think they should have had those back then, but obviously they didn't have that kind of technology. But
Right, but you get what I'm saying though, with how long it takes to reload.
No, you can't play that game. That's not how this works. You can't say, I think that they were all really dumb because of all the ways that they fought, claiming in how she phrases this, effectively that she is more intelligent than literally every single military mind for basically the majority of human history fighting in formations. Not only that, but she says, when asked basically to like, oh, well, why do you think it was dumb? Like, what should they have done? What ways could they have improved it? Because you can't just say that something is stupid or doesn't work or is dumb and then not reinforce with how it ought be done because you're not actually providing a reason in that way. She says, oh, they should, it's difficult for me to like explain because it doesn't actually make any sense. As best I can tell, the argument put forward is that they should have used machine guns, but obviously they didn't have machine guns. Ergo, I guess she's saying that they should have invented machine guns 100 years, 200 years before they did. Of course, they did have things like the air rifles, and they had things like puckle guns and whatnot. They very rudimentary. I guess we can explain them as more like modern-esque firearms, but they didn't use those for a lot of other reasons, mainly of economy and efficiency. Oh, Lord. Charge the battery pack. It's telling me to charge the battery. I'm running out of battery now. Is there anything else to finish this up with? Let's see. Let's see really quick. I'm running out of camera battery. I've been doing this for too long. They're not offering anything new. The cats are playing again. That's cute. We got more of a reaction. She actually kind of had a little smile there. I didn't think it was possible at first. She gives more of a reaction to the cats than to the material that she's being paid to look at. Yeah, the last 20 seconds is them just asking us to subscribe and then talking about cats. Jesu Christus. Okay, so, dear, how long have I been? I've been sitting here for an hour and a half. Oh my God. All right. There's a truck outside. All right, that's that. An hour and 20 minutes of just, oh God. Okay. Thank you all so very much for watching, particularly, of course, to my dear supporters on Patreon and to all of you, my dear viewers. Trying to be more formal with these exits. What else can I say? I don't know. I can't think of anything else. I'm tired. My mind is just, oh God, it's racked. Thank you all so very much for watching. And of course, until the next time, my dear viewer, I am and I shall remain your most humble and obedient of servants. Farewell.